Welcome back to another episode of Shadow School. I'm your host, Brianna Elise Miller. This morning, I'm feeling very deep in my voice today. This morning, we are diving into, I feel like I say this every time, one of my favorite gene keys. I was not aware of this gene key. It doesn't come up in my chart in human design or gene keys at all. And I hadn't had the pleasure of contemplating it until last week for Strange Magic when I created a playlist for it, and it was so good and so resonant. And that's why I'm really excited. This is one of those ones that I found so personally resonant. And so I'm hoping that my reflections on it will also help you feel the very same and that you feel very seen in this particular gene key, and that it really lights a fire under your tuchus so that you can step out and be seen in the world. Because today we are focused on Gene Key 8, the shadow of mediocrity, the gift of style, and the Siddhi, the Siddhi, Siddhi, that's how that's spelled, which means divine gift. This is like the being level of consciousness. The divine gift is exquisiteness. Whew, that feels like so effervescent to even just say that word, exquisiteness. Woo. The dilemma here in this shadow, in this gene key, is imitation. And I'm going to kick us off actually by sharing a story and not diving right into the thinking of this. Several years ago, I was working with a spiritual healer and coach, and I was in her space, and she was doing some work with me to identify blocks in my body, and she was using magnets to do this work. It was such an incredible session. And at the end, when she was done, she reflected back to me the things that she had discovered. She had discovered some aspects of control as a block in there. Like, if you know anything about me or around me now or then, you know that's a thing. She also discovered a particular word that came through that really just knocked me off of my center. If I even had, I don't think I even had a center at that time, at that point in my life, but it really rocked me. As she said, there's a blockage around the word shine. And the second that word came out of her mouth, I just totally lost it. I just broke down and was just really, really like bawling my eyes out crying. And at the moment, I had no idea why, what was behind that word. Gosh, what would trigger that single word that just kind of seemed like it just wung out of nowhere? What the heck was behind that? And I composed myself somewhat as much as I could. And I left that session thinking to myself, what just happened? What was that? This is a period in my life where I was working a ton. I was in a new position at a big publicly traded company. The company I had been working with had been acquired at that point, and we were coming in to reinvigorate an old business unit that was kind of on the decline. And so there was so much work, so much lift to do to invent and to be creative and to resuscitate that business, but also to bring along the entire team that was still currently in that business. And so you can imagine there was a lot going on at that time, a lot of work, a lot of expansion for me personally as a leader and as someone working. It was a real growth edge for me. Before that, I was working in brand strategy and I had my own business. I was serving clients and working with them on clarifying their mission and their purpose and their product suite and creating that clarity and allowing them to reflect it out into the world. And then I took this job and rolled up my whole business and put myself in this situation that was really just completely different from anything that I had experienced in my whole life. Adding to that, that I was doing a whole bunch of personal growth and development. I was in a bunch of groups. I was going to Toastmasters every week. And we were my Toastmasters group was like really focused on business professionals. And so we were like very much like getting it done and showing up and giving speeches and giving feedback and digging in and networking and doing all the things. I was going to a million events. I was always in downtown Chicago. And it was a lot. And this woman who actually happened to be another Toastmasters member in my group, that was the spiritual healer, gave me this gift that was this word. And here I was so triggered and confronted by this word. But at the same time, I felt like I was out in the world, being seen, showing myself, doing all of these things. And so I was so perplexed by what grip this word had over me. And for a long time, for years, in fact, after this, anytime I would get up the guts to share the story of that experience that I had with that healer in that room and that word, shine, with someone else, it would still make me emotional and bring me to tears. And I would choke up and not even always be able to get that word, shine, out. And after many years of working with it and trying to understand what was underneath, we're in shadow school because oftentimes we have things like this in our life, a word, a situation, a feeling that comes out of nowhere that we didn't know was there before. We get confronted with something that we can either ignore and pretend like that didn't happen and let it go and just move on with our day, just barrel on with our whatever we're doing in our daily life, or we can really work with it and sit with it. And I did, because I've always been very naturally curious and problem solving. And so I put a lot of problem solving effort, a lot of masculine energy to figuring out what was behind this word and what gave me such an issue with being able to even say it, articulate it out loud. And that led me to see one of my very core wounds and fears in this particular lifetime. I'm sure it's one that I've carried across many, which was a fear that it isn't safe to shine. It isn't safe to be seen fully. And that even though I had been putting myself out there and doing a lot of work and speaking and writing a lot and publishing and hosting events even on my own, I was running my own business even before this job. I had this model of success that I had projected out into the world, but it wasn't necessarily me. It was emulating a model for success, even a rebellious one, but it was modeling after something that I wanted to be seen as. It wasn't actually vulnerably allowing others to see me. And I recognize now that I didn't know who the me was. And so since that point, it's been a total unlearning process for me. And that's what examining our shadows can help us do. A shadow is not always some big scary thing. It's not like a monster lurking. It's usually some beautiful part of ourselves that we've hidden away because we've felt like it's undesirable. And so today we're going to explore some of the fears associated with the shadow of mediocrity, the way that our collective society really reinforces mediocrity and conformity and staying inside of the box. So let's dive in. This shadow of mediocrity is really rooted in everyone staying in a comfort zone. And right now, you can like even just look everywhere. Everyone's wearing beige everything. It's totally fine. It seems to be a trend right now. So I'm not trying to like make a fuss about everybody wearing beige, but it is pretty funny that You can scroll through your Instagram feed or your LinkedIn feed or whatever it is, and you can see like everyone's using brown and taupe and tan and their colors. And or on the opposite side of the spectrum, everyone in the spiritual world is starting to look the same. Like they've all got similar hairstyles and they're all wearing the same kind of hat, and there's a feather here or there, and like it's all very same, even when it is apart from the standard in society. Even if we're not conforming, those who aren't conforming are still conforming in a way, just to a different group. And what this does is that it allows us to like live these very safe, comfortable lives in the way that they're very similar to one another. Like, oh, this person's doing this. That means it's okay to do this. I can do that too. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to invent a whole world for myself. It's kind of low energy and safe, right? And one of the reasons why it feels so safe is because all of our systems and our kind of education, business, the world of government, everything is set up for this kind of false efficiency where we need to fit into a certain box so that we can be classified in a certain way. We can be judged against a standardized test or assessment to know where we fall in a particular area, how smart we are in English, or, like how much we should be paid for this particular degree. And all of this is this like false layer of structure that society has added into our lives to create some kind of false order. We've been talking about chaos. We've been talking about all these other shadows that have us as humans, as a society, like really want control and order. As a result of that control and order, that means that we all kind of have to fit into these boxes to live and operate and move about the world. And so our society does not encourage people to rise out of that. We don't encourage genius in any way. We don't encourage people to think outside of the box. Business, a lot of times, will say that they want it, and then when it happens, there's a lot of, I don't know, that's too risky, or we won't really invest in that. And so there are actually very few businesses even that are really flowing with creativity and innovation. Many of them claim to be innovative and disruptive and to want creativity. But then all of the behaviors and the structures actually end up stifling it and even making those innovations seem very similar across different businesses. So even the innovations, the type of innovations, are somewhat conforming to a specific mold. And primarily because those innovations have to make money in some way. And that ultimately restricts down what people are creating. So we have this sea of sameness in business and school and human beings, in the way that we live our lives and the houses that we construct and what we do every day as our routines. And we don't really make a lot of room for individuals in societies. And these are kind of deemed as outsiders or reactionaries. These free thinkers can feel a little bit dangerous to a system that is set up for structure and stability and control and sameness and standardization. And so we get things like black sheep as an identifier for someone who stands out, or someone in your family that is not like everyone else in your family. And we have these labels that have a negative connotation, like nobody wants to be the black sheep, nobody wants to be a misfit, nobody wants to be the rebel in your family. And it's really funny. I was like thinking to myself, where did that line black sheep come from? Because, I've always kind of considered myself a black sheep in some ways, like a little bit of a rebel in some ways. And that's another aspect, which I'll share with you in a second. But so I looked it up and it was like, oh, this totally makes sense. As a fiber artist, I totally understand this. Black sheep basically is an undesirable color whenever that comes through in a flock of white sheep, they get a black sheep that comes through. It's just a genetic thing that happens. And it's not desired by the commercial market because that black wool cannot be dyed other colors. So even when they would process it, they'd have to take it out and process it separately from the rest of the wool. Like there's this undesirability of this black wool because we can't manipulate, because we can't sell it as readily. So that I felt like just so emphasized all of what we've been talking about today, which is like conformity. We can't make money off of it, so we don't want it. And on the opposite side of this, nature, like actual nature, wants so desperately diversity. Diversity, 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 and differentiation. That's actually nature because that encourages us to be able to live on. If we like narrow down everything and focus it to only being one way, like every human has to be one way, the gene pool gets smaller and smaller, makes us really susceptible to just being totally killed off. Differentiation and diversity and growing and making the gene pool be able to mutate and grow and be different over time encourages and allows us to actually have a better rate of survival and encourages us to be able to expand and cooperate in different ways with our environment and the rest of nature, like to adapt to what differentiation is coming from nature itself. Like that is the agenda of the universe and nature. It's constant evolution. It's constant change and emergence. But if we're in mediocrity, change and emergence is terrifying. And so it's stifled in very nuanced ways, in very deliberate and clear and obvious ways. Let's talk about some of the fears that are in here. Fears of being seen, which I mentioned with my own personal story, and fears of not receiving love as a result, like the black sheep isn't wanted. And so if you are this black sheep, like that means you don't belong. You're not as good as, you might feel a huge amount of isolation and loneliness. And as you know, as human beings, feeling part of the collective and being part of a tribe is part of our actual like core group of needs. And loneliness is one of the things that contributes most to our unhealthiness, like our actual physical unhealthiness. We really need others and to be in a community with others where we feel seen and held and belong. So this need to fit in so that we don't get ostracized and feel isolated and like we don't belong hugely drives this fear. There's also a fear here of success. A lot of times people talk about fear of failure that drives them. You don't hear a lot of people talk about having a fear of success. It's just, again, something that I've experienced personally, and I realized many years ago that's really coupled with this fear of being seen, this fear of shining and standing out. Because if you do actually achieve success, not in the way where you've been emulating someone else up to society's standard of success, but success that is uniquely yours in the path that you've paved for yourself, if you achieve that success, then that means you're showing up and you're actually being seen for who you are. You're doing things your own unique way. You're in your own style of success. And when you're there, people can see you. And people might judge that and to not be okay or desirable. And so there's a huge fear there in the success of actually being seen too. And then there's a huge fear that we actually don't believe in ourselves. And so we have these dreams when we're children, and we have these things that we love to do when we're children, when we're creative and flowing and immersion, and we have this freedom before we learn all of these ideas about how to fit in and to move forward and what the right way to live and work in society is to be successful, to attract wealth and all of these things. We have these amazing dreams. And then over time, we kind of learn by being shown or told, explicitly or not, that they're not really possible. And so as a result, and through other things that happen throughout our lives, like creativity scars, etc., we start to learn to not believe in ourselves. And when I say believe in ourselves, I mean believe in the unique expression, this beautiful natural genius that only we have in this lifetime. And then when we're adults, that belief in ourselves is kind of gone. Like we empty like ourselves of this belief. And then later in life, when there are opportunities for us to take risks that allow us to actually rise up as individuals, to have our unique style and genius in the world, we're terrified to do it because we don't have this underlying belief in ourselves. And we don't even know that we don't believe in ourselves in that way. And that's probably why a lot of us have this sense of imposter syndrome, or we show up and project confidence, but we don't feel confidence. We have a ton of self-doubt as a result. I think that's something that we learn when we're small and our dreams are squashed. No matter what or how fantastic those dreams are, the fact that they are suppressed in such a way just starts to condition us in that direction. So this thinking inside the box, this compromising ourselves, our dreams, our uniqueness, it really serves empire. Like empire is the capital E empire, like all this efficiency, this collective system, this world that we are living in that is really honestly an illusion of agreement that we've all made unwillingly or willingly. It does not serve evolution. It doesn't serve your personal evolution and your own growth and your own wholeness, and it doesn't serve collective evolution of humanity or consciousness overall. Now, let's talk a little bit before we hop into repressive and reactive states about how even being a rebel is still a sense of conformity and mediocrity. I mentioned it lightly a second ago when I talked about how even those that are standing out somewhat, like there's this whole group of like spiritual leaders, like if you look at them on Instagram, you can see, but they all start to look the same and they all start to sound the same and do the same things. And everybody's drinking cacao. I love cacao. I've worked with it now for like a year. I'm not bashing any of these things. I'm not saying any of these things are wrong, but things get trendy and we emulate them. It's like a natural thing that we do as humans. And then it's up to us to kind of test out and discern, like, is this actually right for me? Does this actually fit with the wholeness and unique expression of me? Or are we kind of doing it to now fit into a different kind of group? Like there's the beige group, there's the dreadlock group, there's the, like hat wearing feather group, there's the, business suit group. There are a ton of groups to fit into. Some of them feel, while you're trying to fit into them, they feel like you are rebelling from another group. And there's a sense there that you are breaking out of this mediocrity, that you're no longer conforming. However, you may still be wanting to be seen a certain way. And whenever we're wanting to be seen a certain way, it's usually because we're trying to create this false self that we think will be acceptable to a certain group. And that, my friend, is still in that shadow of mediocrity. That is not true rebellion. That is like a false rebellion that is just more conformity. It just looks different from this conformity. So I know I have personally lived in that many, many, many times. I know I'm in that shadow anytime I'm in my wardrobe or like putting on my makeup or doing my hair, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I bet people will think this is really cool. And then I'm like, the whole time interacting with people, and I'm like, I really hope that they compliment this outfit because I tried really hard to make it very cool and to stand out and be interesting. And so now I'm like, okay, whenever I'm doing that, I'm catching myself and I'm like, stop doing that. You're doing that for other people to be seen a certain way, not because it's how your soul's essence wants to present itself today. So now the fun is, how do I want to feel? How do I want to allow my higher self to come through today? And How am I going to let the unique expression of me be seen by others in a way that might be really uncomfortable? And I don't need them to say anything about it, to love it, to do anything with it, to compliment me. None of those things matter. And it's changing all the time. It's not one thing always. And that gets us to the gift of style, which we'll explore in a second. But first, let's dive into the repressive state. As you might remember from previous episodes, the repressive expression of a particular shadow really is introverted energy. It's a collapsing in. The fear kind of draws you from the surface of your life inward. And here we have a state of being wooden. And this is when people kind of give up on those dreams, give up on the dreams, give up on being a unique self. Like, honestly, that's a lot of hard work. And it's time consuming and it takes energy until it's natural, right? Just like anything does at the beginning, it takes energy. We've got to unlearn a whole bunch of heavy stuff in order to get over here. So I'm just going to go with the flow of conformity instead. And you kind of get fully compromised in your life. You fear change then. And as a result, there's kind of no life force. Like, you lose a huge sense of vitality when you're no longer living from your own unique expression and you're just emulating and imitating expression of others. You lose vitality, you lose life force, you lose your grit for being the you that you are. And you start to live your life as a series of compromises. And a compromise might be as simple as wearing something because you think that it's appropriate for a situation, not because it really lights you up. Or a compromise could be taking a certain job or not taking a certain job, being in a relationship or not being in a relationship, not saying the thing that you feel convicted to say. I could go on and on and on. There are so many compromises that we can make in our lives. And there are compromises that are external, like, deciding that you'll go to a different place for dinner with friends because they want something, which are really reasonable compromises to make. That's how we work as a collective. That's how we cooperate. But there are internal or inner compromises that have you do something that goes against your inner sense of discernment and values and virtues. And those are the type of compromises that get us to a place where we are living our life beholden to the responsibilities that we've amassed. We're living our life in a sense of conformity and compromise overall. And we are not living in alignment with our values and our true self. It feels like our life is being done to us. It's happening to us. We have no power over it. It doesn't belong to us. And here we have no space to breathe. We have no space to create or be our unique selves or to express. In fact, that just seems like a whole lot of work that you don't need to deal with. And this is just like, oh, so hollow. This life is so hollow. And that's why it's called a wooden. On the reactive state, which you remember, reactive is like externally expressed. It's more extroverted in nature, this energy. It's usually venting some anger or frustration. It's projected outward. And here we have the state of being artificial. So when we are in a reactive expression of the shadow of mediocrity, we live a very artificial life. On the outside, it may seem successful, hell, and may even seem original in some ways. But really, we're still having a lot of inner compromise. And what I find that I identify with this is that oftentimes people don't even know that they're doing this on this level. Like, a lot of times we can feel the compromise a lot in the wooden part. Like, you are just like totally drained and have like no zest for anything in your life, let alone anything original. In artificial, I think we can get really carried away with projecting an image of ourselves out there that is what we think is appropriate, what we think we should be, what we've been told we should be, and we learned we should be. And this is also hugely compromising to our inner state of values and higher self. But it does project outwardly, like, we are pushing forward and doing the things, and so there is like a momentum to it almost that keeps the game alive in a way, that keeps us buying into the game, and it's almost like, when I get to this next level, then I can really be me. But the problem is, after so many years of projecting an artificial sense of who you are to achieve outward success, you lose contact with who the actual you is. You've worn masks and you've put up a facade and performance for so long that then when you pause and you actually think like, okay, what does the real me actually want? There's like no there. You have no connection to it because you've been so disconnected, but also because you've been forcing a false version of you out into the world. And this, in the repressive state, people tend to stay with relationships because they fear change, even if the relationship is no longer serving them. And the reactive state, the artificial, people have a hard time staying in relationships because the facade wears thin very quickly, and then they have to run away from truly others seeing that they don't know who they are. And there is a huge amount of work to be done there that's really confronting. I'm going to share a quote that will transition us from the fear of mediocrity and the shadow of mediocrity into the gift of style. And that quote is, "The creative adult is the child who survived." The huge process of moving out of mediocrity into the gift of style is an unlearning process. It's a recognizing of, oh, all of these layers of conditioning have been built up over the years, and now I've got to strip each of these away so that I can get down to the beautiful diamond that is me underneath all of this coal, and I just have to wipe it off and I have to find it. But it's this peeling back. And I love this quote so much of, "The creative adult is the child who survived," which really, for me, connects back to this ability of us to like keep our dreams alive, keep our childhood fantastical dreams alive, not to necessarily go do them, but to just know that they're possible, and we have a belief in ourselves, and we have a belief in our creativity. And creativity is one of those things, one of those muscles that is just worn down over the years by work and school and society and people telling us that we're not creative or we shouldn't explore something because we're not good at it. And by good at it, they mean you can't make a living at it, and not that you don't enjoy it. And so reconnecting back to those things that we enjoy, that we had so much joy in when we were children, allows us to reconnect with that creativity and to grab it back onto it and be creative as adults. There is like this creativity loss that happens when we're children. In schools, they can actually measure it by asking kids to raise their hands from grade to grade to grade. Do you think that you're creative? And more kids, as the grades go on, do not raise their hands. And it's because they've learned somewhere along the way that creativity is this thing that only some people have. That's not true. That's not true. And I like to think of this creativity as a natural flowering of our individuality, which gets us to the gift of style. The gift of style is not about clothes. It's not about necessarily your outward experience and the way that people see this human suit. It is about the natural flowering of your individuality. It is not of the mind. It's not something that you're creating or crafting or cultivating. It is not something that you are projecting out into the world. It is a natural state of being. It's emergent. It's spontaneous. It's not the same all of the time. It's wild. It shows up in different ways if we allow it, if we play with it, if we allow it to emerge from us, as opposed to trying to control it and project it and have it be a certain way. So sometimes it definitely does come through in what we wear, but it is about much more than that. Style is about how we speak and the essence of our aura and our energy in everything that we do. It's really about bringing our natural gifts and our genius online and sharing them in our own unique way with the world in every situation and every interaction, no matter what that is. So there isn't a work you and a home you and a fun you and a group you and a solo you. There is this emergent style you that is the only unique version of you. And it may show up different at different times. It's constantly emerging and evolving and changing. There is no one set version of this. And one of the things I think that gets in the way of this, in addition to all the conformity that we have talked about, is how much we attach to things that are related to our identity. And what I mean, I'm getting like kind of stuffy today. Lots of talking, not enough coffee. When we get to thinking about conformity and style, we can think about like, what are the parts of our identity that we attach to? So from either of these lenses of this mediocrity or style, we can see that we might be attached to things like, I'm not the type of person that would wear a rainbow robe. I'm the type of person that wears X, Y, or Z. Or I'm an introvert, so I don't want to be seen. Or I'm loud. Or I'm bold, or I'm controlling, or I'm an Enneagram 8, or like on and on and on and on. We don't even know that we have these tiny little attachments, but we do. And they live in our shadows. They live in our unconscious, and they drive our decisions and our behaviors because we're totally unaware of them. So whenever we're at the store and we are drawn to this amazing, glorious outfit, we're like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But I can't wear that. I don't wear things like that. That's too bold for me. I'm not bold. I'm an introvert. I don't want others to see me. So we might not even know that we're doing that. We might just be like, I can't do that. And that's the only conscious thought that we have. Like, I can't get away with that. But we have been literally vacuumed to this item of clothing because it stands out to us and it literally beckons our soul toward it. And yet we get to it. We are just in rapture with it, touching it, feeling it, looking at, turning it over, looking at all the beautiful qualities of it. And then something has us decide, oh, I can't do that. What? That is an example of living in the shadow state, living in the fear, but also having an attachment to, it might not even necessarily be one of the fears we've discussed. It might be a different fear that is underneath of this attachment. Or honestly, it might just be that you're really good at the habit of this attachment, of this identity. So a great example I like to talk about is being introverted or extroverted. People attach to these as if it is the rule. And then they allow and blame and say, like, make excuses for all of their behaviors because they've attached themselves to being an introvert or an extrovert. Well, knowing and studying how the brain works and habit change and behavior change psychology and spiritual development and personal growth and contemplation and emotional breakthrough and cognitive behavioral, like studying all these things, I'm looking at this and I'm going, you're actually just good at the habits of being an introvert or an extrovert. You're not an introvert. You're just really practiced at those things. You're so practiced at them that you have well-worn neural grooves, which means that you naturally show up that way on default now. You've made it such a habit you don't even know that you're making the choice in the moment. It's just default. And now you've identified with that and you've called yourself something and you've put yourself in a box that you can't move out of. Instead of, there are introverts, there are extroverts. No, there are people that are practiced at these behaviors. Now, certainly, there are certain things that bring us energy and take our energy away, and I'm not arguing that at all. However, If we're talking about showing up as our unique selves, really expressing our genius out here, it is worthwhile, while we're unlearning all of the fears that are addressed with conformity, that we also examine and take a look at the attachments that we have to aspects of our identity that are also keeping ourselves in a box. And this box is a creation of our very own. So when we're looking at the gift of style, this is really about being adaptive, emergent, evolving constantly. The you are now was not the you are 5 minutes ago. If you went, just for example, to go pick an outfit or choose something to eat or say something, you would do it differently than you had 5 minutes ago. If you are allowing this soul version of yourself, this higher self, this gift version of yourself to actually express itself through your human suit. That's where we are with the gift of style. Then we move into the Siddhi, the divine gift of exquisiteness. There's that word again. It's just like bubbles. And this is really about when we allow the divine essence of ourselves to shine through at the individual level. There is a duality here where we experience at the Siddhic level. This is where we're beyond words, we're beyond doing and all of these things. It's more of a being state of consciousness. There is like a duality here where we experience at the same time the differentiation of our unique genetic vehicle, this human being that we are in. And at the same time, we experience being part of consciousness, so this oneness that is totally undifferentiated. So those things are happening simultaneously in the Siddhi of Exquisiteness. We are simultaneously perceiving and being able to sit with the fact that we are both a being, a single being of unified consciousness with no differentiation, and a totally differentiated, unique genetic human being in this human suit. And we're both of those things at the same time. Hi, Bhavna. I want to read you this quote from the Gene Keys book because I just think it's so beautiful to describe the Siddhi of Exquisiteness. You shine like a diamond in the heart of creation, and wherever you look, you see other diamonds in various states of clarity, each one unique and each one exquisite and incomparable. I think that's just such a beautiful visual to describe this exquisiteness. Exquisiteness and even your style is not something that can be emulated or imitated. This is very divergent from just standing apart from the crowd or being a rebel. This gift of style and the Siddhi of Exquisiteness has you continue to show up and evolve in such a dynamic way, it can never be copied. It can never be imitated. And people that are like this are not leaders to follow or emulate. They're examples of exquisiteness. They're examples of style. And there's only one person that can be the exquisiteness that is you, and it's you. There is no path to follow. You actually have to create your own path because you can't follow another path and be your own unique expression. I'm going to leave you with this. The presence of those people who are living in the gift of style and the Siddhi of Exquisiteness act as a light that shines on other people, that frees them from the shadow of mediocrity. So certainly people can't emulate you, but your mere presence can act as some tension and friction and a trigger or something quite beautiful that elevates others into their own style and individuality, which I just think is so beautiful. So that is the call to action here, which is like, let's contemplate what are parts of our identity that we're attached to. What are areas in our life where we may feel like we are living through shoulds, where we are imitating or emulating or following a prescribed path, where we are making inner compromises that are not aligned with our values and our individual sense of self and our own expression? Where are we holding ourselves back from wearing the thing or saying the thing or being the thing that lights our soul on fire because we don't feel like it's appropriate, or we can't get away with it, or we can't, like we're not the type of person that does this? How can you start to step into allowing this higher sense of you to shine through this human being vehicle that you're embodying right now in a way that has you be a 100% original, unique expression of you? And then that version of you can be a light that shines and turns other lights on. Love so much, love so much, love so much this conversation today. Thank you for being with me. I am going to share on Instagram and probably on LinkedIn too. I have a playlist. We danced to it last week in Strange Magic for this particular gene key, and I think it's so good. And usually this is only available in the paid subscriber section of the Muse and Method Substack, but I'm going to share this particular playlist because I think it will be really fantastic for you all to work with and contemplate in the coming weeks as you think about the shadow and the gift of style and exquisiteness. And it's just such a stunning playlist. So I'm definitely going to share that with you. And I also want to leave you with a message of I am doing so much fun work behind the scenes, putting together this program, Beautiful Boundaries, for women that want to be able to set and create amazing, loving boundaries that allow them to discern their own energy and emotions while creating more connection and intimacy and spreading more love in the world instead of putting up barriers and walls and shielding our hearts. If you're interested in joining that program, it's going to be a 6-week program. I think it's going to launch sometime late March. I am opening enrollment on International Women's Day, March 8th, which is when you can officially purchase your spot. Until then, I have a wait list that you can find on my website, museandmethod.com/boundaries is the link. Sign up there. You can learn a little bit more about what the program entails. I am crafting it behind the scenes. I've just done the first workshop and it's so good. This weekend, I'm going to work on the second workshop and outlining all of the amazing transformative practices that we'll work on together. And I really hope that you'll consider joining me for this, because that is really my jam right now. It is, how can we rethink the energetics behind some of this advice that we've been given on personal development and growth? How can we build skills together, like contemplation and setting beautiful boundaries, in a way that we are actually spreading more love, patience, gentleness, peace, kindness to ourselves, and then, of course, outward into the world to others? I will see you tomorrow for episode 9 of Shadow School. Until then, I hope you have an amazing